Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Now today I'm going to be doing a ranking of all the horror movies I watched in 2023. Groovy. Now there may be some that I have missed here and there, so if they're not on the list, A, I haven't watched it, or B, I don't really class them as horror. Movies like Beau is Afraid, 65, Godzilla Minus One, as much as I wanted to put it on the list, I don't really class them as full horror movies. So if you're wondering where it is probably one of them too. However, I have seen 35 horror movies from 2023. So we're just going to go through them in order here, from which one I enjoyed the least to the best. Now, before I get into it, everyone, I just want to say thank you so much for showing me a lot of support on the channel this year. I only started it around April, May time, so I've only been going for about 8 to 9 months, something like that. And the support has been great. You know, thank you for everyone who has subscribed to the channel, everyone who watches these videos, even if it's just a bit here and there, anyone who shows this channel the time of day, people who comment, people who've been on the live streams with me. I've had such a great time with you guys, chatting one-to-one. If you do want to come on some horror live streams in future, please do let me know in the comments or on my social media. You know, I'll leave the links to all that down below. Please do let me know and I'll get you on here. And, you know, we'll have a great discussion about genre that we love. So this is probably likely my first video in 2024. So I just want to wish everyone, you know, a happy 2024. Hope you all had a great Christmas as well. And, you know, once again, thanks for the support. So let's just get into it now with the worst horror movie I watched this year. And, you know, I didn't absolutely hate the last movie on this list, but it just was the weakest one out the lot. Coming in last place is going to be She Came From the Woods. Now, this is usually a movie that is right up my street, a summer camp slasher, and it tries to pay homage to them famous movies from the 80s, like the Friday the 13th franchise and The Burning. But unfortunately, it goes way down the supernatural route too much for me personally, and the movie just had a lot of unlikable characters, lots of bland scenes where things weren't really happening to move the story forward, and some really bad special effects, makeup effects, that really took me out of the last 20 minutes of the film. Now, there was some moments here that were cool, like especially on a school bus scene where all the kids kind of turn on the bus driver and stuff, and then there was other things happening by the, you know, the bay, and things are happening in the background, so there's a bit of tension building here and there. But apart from these moments, there was nothing really else to add from this movie. There was one character in this film that I did like. I thought he was quite funny, but he's someone I couldn't really get behind because he was an arsehole, basically, and you knew he kind of had to die. He wasn't the main protagonist or anything, but he was one of the more fun side characters in any horror movie I've seen this year. But apart from a couple of scenes and him, this movie really didn't have anything going for it, and I just stopped caring halfway through the movie, and it feels like it was dragging a lot, even though it was only a 90-minute movie. It seemed way longer than that, so the pacing was kind of slow, really. So unfortunately, She Came From the Woods has to come last in this ranking. Next up, we have The Pope's Exorcist. Now, Russell Crowe is the only real redeeming factor of this movie. He was the one keeping me glued to the screen. And with the setup of the story, I thought, okay, this could be good. Let's go and see what he's investigating, this exorcism, as a lot of these exorcism movies do. And he's got to get to the bottom of it. And I loved how he was going around on this little scooter and stuff. Thought that was really fun. Like this moped, should I say. But unfortunately, this just falls down the generic demonic possession movie route, where we just get a ton of these every few months. There's at least one a year where the kid who's possessed is just lying on the bed, throwing his arms everywhere, screaming in a demonic voice. That, to me, is just not scary. And I came out the cinema really disappointed with this, but also not surprised, if that makes sense. I just thought it was going to be a little bit better, but unfortunately, as you can tell, it's one of the worst horror movies of the year. So something that you've just seen a million times before. Next up, we have Mother May I, which is a cool concept which sees Kyle Gallner and his fiance, I believe, going to stay at his mother's house that she's left him because she's died. And the mother seems to be, his girlfriend seems to be taking the personality of his mother, and you kind of don't know if she's being possessed by the mother or whatever. And that is a cool concept, but it's just not executed very well. I didn't really like this couple, even though they were good performances. They're just eating mushrooms all the time and getting high, and you kind of don't know if it's the mushrooms or this woman is really possessed by the mother. And it just really dragged. It was a very boring movie. Like, it was just them two having conversations all the way through it. And Kyle Gallner was trying to figure out what was happening. It was just a nothing movie, really. And one that is not very memorable at all. I didn't enjoy this, really, apart from two good performances for two very bland characters. They tried their best with what they were given, but just didn't work out, this film. Next up, we have Dark Harvest, one that I thought was going to be awesome. This came out around the October time, and it is a movie that takes place around Halloween, where this creature comes up from the cornfields every Halloween, and it's up to the boys in the town to kill this damn thing and become the winner, you know, the king of the town for that year until it reappears again next year. And that is a cool concept. Unfortunately, I hated every single character in this movie. I just couldn't get behind anyone. And the fact that the town was in trouble, I realized that I didn't care because everyone in this town was an asshole, and I kind of wanted the monster to win in the end and just take over and just devour these people in the end because they were just awful human beings. Even the main protagonist just up his own ass so much. He'd eat himself if he was made of chocolate, and the movie it gave me one of them I don't care feelings, really. I don't care what happened, and the movie came way too ambitious for its own good. It tried to do way too many things, and by the end I was scratching my head going, what is even going on here? But there were a few good kills. I thought the monster, even though it was all CGI, looked kind of awesome, really. I'm not really a fan of CGI, but I think they've done a good job. And yeah, like I said, some of the kills were awesome, really. Very good concept, not executed well at all, unfortunately. With the characters just not being very likable, didn't help at all. So that is Dark Harvest. Next up, we have the Black Demon, and they managed to make a gigantic megalodon shark movie. Boring. Yes. This is about a guy who he works for this oil company, and he has to go and see about this oil rig in the middle of the sea by Mexico, in this little town by Mexico that has been cursed. You kind of don't know what's going on, but apparently they are all terrified of this thing living in the ocean, and it is the megalodon shark, and that is the curse that has been put on this town. They kind of can't get away from it because they can't sail anywhere. This guy goes over to this oil rig to investigate what's happened, and he gets there and there's only 2 people left on the oil rig, and then this megalodon shark starts attacking it, and it becomes one of them movies where it feels like isolation. Him and his family are stuck on this oil rig with these 2 characters, and they can't get off because this megalodon shark is going to devour them. Now, there are some good moments in this film, most, as you guess, with the shark. However, there's only about 3 moments in the entire movie where we see this shark in this 90-minute runtime. And after the movie, after discussing it with my wife, we both realised that this movie is just a metaphor for saving the planet and not destroying the ocean, because this curse has been put on the town because they were polluting the ocean. So, yeah, I mean, there's a political type message in there, and I don't think it came across all that well when it's all said and done. And there's some weird directional shots where it feels like God is put the curse on this town by putting the shark there, and these camera shots are just zooming into the sky every time something bad happens, and I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of cringy a little bit there. So the Black Demon, unfortunately, had its moments, didn't work for me all that much, and the main protagonist of the movie was, again, like a lot of these films before it suffer from, very unlikable. Next up, we have There's Something Wrong with the Children, another movie that had a cool concept that wasn't executed very well, unfortunately. A couple of families go and stay at this remote cabin, I think it was, or this cottage, and they go and explore around the surrounding area, and they come across this cave and find something in there. I think one of the parents seems to know something about the cave or what's in there, and he tells the kids not to go in, but they go in anyway, and the kids start acting a little bit weird the next day, and things start to happen, bad things, around the family members involving the two children who've seen this thing and sort of been cursed a little bit there. The movie had a good start, an okay end, terrible middle ground. There was a lot of stuff that was just not happening in the middle of the movie there. Long sequences that were just like, okay, what's going on here now? The dialogue was terrible. Like, these families are talking about when they had foursomes and stuff, and the other family's like, oh yeah, all right. And it seems like they kind of want to get involved in a foursome with the other couple, and it was just like, what is going on here? What is this? What's this dialogue they're putting in? It just feels like filler. So yeah, I wanted to love this one a little bit more because, like I said, I thought I had a cool concept, but just not executed very well when it was all said and done. And again, lots of characters in there I just did not like. The two kids done a good job. It was mainly the adult characters that just weren't doing it for me at all. That dialogue certainly didn't help. Next up is a movie that we probably thought was going to be bottom of the list, and that is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I've got to say I enjoyed this a little bit more than everyone else, but I've got to say it is also not a great movie either. I usually look for story in my movies, and this one barely had any. There was an attempt at story, but basically this is a movie just going around looking for the next slasher kill. You know, it's basically Winnie the Pooh and Piglet getting pissed off because Christopher Robin left the woods and left them to fend for themselves because I think he wanted to go to college or something. And a group of teenage girls, or young adult girls, should I say, go to these woods, and Winnie the Pooh and Piglet start to pick them off one by one. And what I liked about this is it didn't hold back. There were some really gnarly kills in there, especially one in the swimming pool where this Piglet's just swinging this sledgehammer into this woman, and I was like, holy shit, this movie is going for it. But that's all there is to the movie. However, even though I love a bit of story, I enjoyed the kills in this film. You know, I thought I like gritty, gnarly kills. I'm someone who's watched a lot of really, disturbing movies. I've seen Salo and Martyrs and all of them, which I plan to review on the channel at some day. And, I kind of like that style at times. And Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey definitely goes for it. However, it's not a very good film, but I just enjoyed it a little bit more than the other movies that came before it. So that is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Next up is Bird Box Barcelona, which I was really excited for, and I did put it on my top 5 most disappointing horror movies list, unfortunately, because this was just nowhere near on the level of the original. The original was a really good surprise for me that just came on Netflix, and I really enjoyed the concept, the movie, how it all played out. Sandra Bullock was awesome. And here we are in Barcelona, and this feels like more of a spin-off than a true sequel. I don't even remember in the first movie, but then there are people working with this curse, really, and are trying to trap people into sort of being possessed or taken over by this virus. And the main protagonist of this film, we don't know it straight away, but he is one of the antagonists. And we learn about 5 or 10 minutes in that he is one of these people who's trying to trick people into opening their eyes to see this thing so it can take over them. I thought that was a cool twist. I liked that approach where we were following the antagonist around instead of the hero, and a nice little switch up there. And there was some really great kills. The first 25 minutes of this movie were really doing it for me. I thought it was awesome. Especially the moment with the train where all these people are just throwing themselves onto the train track, and there's people just, the way they commit suicide in this movie, it's pretty gnarly, and another movie that just goes for it. Unfortunately, the middle ground, we go in a little bit of a direction in the second act, a little bit of a different direction, and the movie just starts to try and develop this story that is way over ambitious and just doesn't work. And the abrupt ending, I was like, really? That movie really went down that path? Again, with all the side characters and stuff, trying to get out the situations, didn't really care for any of them. And the movie just sort of stopped making sense for me. and I lost all interest. Once I was enjoying myself, it just went that way, and it just did not work. But for the first 25-30 minutes, it was highly enjoyable, and I liked the direction I thought they were going to take. Overall, not a very good sequel to Bird Box, and I hope we get a better sequel in future, because there is something there for this world, I feel, but it wasn't Bird Box Barcelona, unfortunately. Next up might be a surprise to some people, and that is No One Will Save You. Now, Caitlin Dever really put in a good performance here, I thought. This is a home invasion film with these aliens that are invading their house in the middle of this countryside by the looks of it, or on the outskirts of town. And the sound design was awesome. And there was some really well-built, tense moments. However, we are shown what these aliens look like really early on, and them tense moments at the start of the movie started to fizzle out a little bit. And the movie just became a little bit of a rinse and repeat at times. And there was a message in there at the end of the movie, or, something you interpret the story to be. And it didn't work for me. I get what they were trying to do, but I'm just like, okay, I think I've seen this done before in so many different ways. It's not all that clever. And the movie, I just did not care for it. After hearing a lot of people say that this is one of the best horror movies of the year, that is just baffling to me. I thought it was pretty average, and not much more than that, really. Like I said, good sound design, good performance, some well-tense built moments. That's about it. Next up, we have The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Now, this is a movie that really dragged for me. And it had such a good concept, a good story to go with. That is a famous, well-known story of how Dracula got to England. And he's kind of in the stowaway in this box. But the first hour totally dragged until we see Dracula himself, which did look awesome, by the way. I thought he looked really good in the movie. And there were some really good scenes in there involving the kills. They were all the best parts of the movie. So all that shit was awesome. However, it takes a long time to get where it's going. Characters in here, you just do not care. Like, there was no personality to any of these characters. I know I say that a lot in these movies, but I think you've got to have strong characters to carry a movie. If the movie's not doing well, sometimes the characters can carry it for you. But here, I just didn't care. Even the main guy who has this arc going on, it wasn't the most interesting arc to get behind, really. It was just one of them movies that only became interesting when the kills were happening, really. And the awesome character of Dracula was just floating about and, picking these people off one by one. There are some what the fuck moments in here because it kind of doesn't care about children and stuff on board. So, when movies go for that, I feel like they've got balls to them, really. But most of this movie was a bit of a drag and a little bit boring, to be honest, but definitely more watchable than the movies that came before it. So that is The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Next up, we have The Exorcist Believer. Now, this was always going to go one way or the other, wasn't it? A follow-up to the scariest and most famous horror movie of all time. A legacy sequel from David Gordon Green. Probably not the best pick for some people because a lot of people are mixed on his Halloween trilogy. I liked Halloween 2018. I liked Halloween Ends. Didn't like Halloween Kills. Yet I'm one of them people who liked Halloween Ends. Sue me. But I just don't know about his directing. So, he throws a lot of humour in his movies, I feel. And that is not something you really want in The Exorcist. And I don't think he threw too much of it in there, to be honest. He did try and go more down the horror route here. But again, this just suffers from being another generic demonic possession movie. I tried my best to get into this one. I really wanted to like it, especially after watching all the Exorcist movies leading up to this. But it just really took its time to get where it wanted to go. Now, I don't mind movies that take the time and, build the story out. But this one just seemed to take a little bit longer than it needed to. It wasn't very well paced for the first hour. It was a good little twist with 2 girls being possessed instead of 1. I think that was David Gordon Green's main draw to this movie, because most movies you see with demonic possession see 1 person possessed, but this one had 2. However, it didn't really matter after a bit. I mean, you'd hardly even notice that was happening, because one of the girls doesn't really get any build up to her story whatsoever, any character development. It's only really Leslie Odom Jr.'s daughter who gets the character build up. And Leslie Odom Jr. was definitely the best thing about this entire movie. I thought he was a good protagonist. You care about what's happening with him and his daughter. He really does look worried throughout the movie. He put a great performance in, and I hope that we see more of him in future. I know he's been in a bunch of movies in the past. But we brought Chris McNeil back here. Ellen Burstyn reprised her role, and she didn't want to, but they doubled her money, so she thought, oh, I can give it to this charity I'm working with. I'll do it. So she obviously did not want to be here, and I don't think they really done her character any favours whatsoever. For me, she's the best actress in the first movie and one of the best characters. But here, she is just throwaway. She's in the movie for 5 damn minutes, and she just brought nothing to it. There is no point in her being here whatsoever. The third act was laughable with all these different characters coming into the room trying to save the day. The movie was just, it didn't feel like an Exorcist film. It felt like a generic demonic possession movie that we get all the damn time. And whether this trilogy happens or not, I've lost a lot of interest, to be honest, after seeing this one. We'll have to see how that plays out. But that is The Exorcist Believer. Next up, we have another one I was looking forward to, and that is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Watched the entire franchise leading up to this one as well, and this has got to be the worst in the franchise for me. Now, it is a watchable movie. There's some really cool gore scenes at times, but this basically is telling us a story that we already know about. It's the Timmy Bateman story, where he was the first person to be buried at this cemetery, and he comes back and wreaks a bit of havoc on the town there. Now, my big problem with this prequel is we know how it's going to end. This is all surrounding Jug Crandall when he was a little bit younger, played by Jackson White. I don't think he brought too much to the character. It didn't feel like Jug Crandall. He's the standout, the standout character in the original Pet Sematary, and John Lithgow does a pretty good job in the remake. Well, here there's just nothing to him, and he wants to leave town, but he can't because this Timmy Bateman's keeping him there, and he feels like he's got to sort all that out. Seen a story going like that before, haven't we? Where someone wants to leave town and they can't. It's a Wonderful Life. There's a perfect example. And this movie just really, it just was very vanilla. It just played the story out like I thought it was going to. And aside from a few cool death scenes here and there and a little bit of good gore, it's not a very memorable film, to be honest. It's watchable, but it's the least favourite of the Pet Sematary films for me. That is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Next up, we have Haunted Mansion, a family-friendly horror movie, probably the most family-friendly horror movie on this list. And this is from Disney. It just very much feels like a Disney movie. Now, there was some fun characters in here, Danny DeVito, most notably. And it's about this family go and stay in this mansion, and they believe it's haunted. And this guy with a magic camera or something, or this camera that can see these ghosts, he basically goes to help and remove these ghosts from the house so the family can live there. It's the first Haunted Mansion movie I've seen. I haven't seen the Eddie Murphy ones or anything, but it hasn't really pushed me to go and watch them ones. This one just had a lot of Disney tropes thrown in. It felt so much like a Disney movie, and it was just forgettable, really. It was a fun time while you're watching it, and then an hour later you go, oh yeah, I remember I watched that movie. I can't remember too much that's going on in it. And I'm struggling to even think now, remember the movie myself. At the time, I put it on my ranking, but it's just one of the most forgettable movies of the year for me. Fun while you're watching it, some cool looking ghosts at times, some fun humour, but then again, just a big blockbuster again that fizzled out, and we had a lot of them this year, didn't we? Next up is Insidious: The Red Door. I was kind of looking forward to this one because it was Patrick Wilson's directional debut, who's done a lot for this franchise. I think he's been in all 4 movies before it, definitely 3. But This is him having his memory wiped, like along with his son Dalton, and they have no recollection of the father in this movie, and they're trying to get along and they can't, and these flashbacks keep happening of what happened years before, and they're trying to get to the bottom of why they don't really like each other, but they can't quite remember, and they go and discover the father again and investigate the father and try and get to the bottom of these demonic things that are happening around them. Now, there were some really cool directional moments in here. I do think Patrick Wilson has talent behind the camera, especially some of the quieter, scary scenes where things are happening in the background. There was an MRI scanning moment that I thought was awesome. And there was some, well-built tension moments in the movie. But my big problem was the story. We are revisiting the first movie. It's them two trying to find out what the father is, how to travel in the father, and how to destroy these demons in the father. Yeah, we've seen all this in the first movie, so it's not really a part of the series that brings anything new to the story. It's just something we've seen all before. It's a watchable enough movie. I did really like Dalton's, roommate in this film. I thought she was really funny and brought a lot of likability to the scenes with miserable Dalton in. He was a problem for me. He just looked so angry all the time, and I get that's what he's meant to be because of his father and stuff, but I just couldn't latch onto the guy at all. So, Insidious, The Red Door, not the worst of the franchise, but on the back end of it, really. Next up, we have Killer Book Club. Now, this was a really cool slasher concept. This came from Netflix, and this was basically about this book club, and a little prank happens at the start of the movie that goes wrong, and someone does die, I believe. I think they die. They start being killed off one by one, but as it's happening, this killer is kind of writing a story, and chapter 1 is someone dying, and they sends it to all their phones, and then chapter 2 is someone else dying, or what's going to happen to the one of them, and they're getting picked off one by one. And I thought, you know what, this was really trying here to be something a little bit different, and in a lot of places it does pull it off. Some really cool kill scenes. I think slashers do have to rely on the creative kills and stuff. The story was, pretty different. I like the way it had horror tropes in there, where it was just, it kind of makes fun of horror, the horror genre in general, by mocking Scream and mocking I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then actually taking their movies and using it for its own good. So it's mocking them but uses them anyway. It knew exactly what it was doing. The characters, not all that memorable. The killer costume, this weird clown mask, was awful. It's probably one of the worst killer costume designs I've ever seen. And the ending was kind of a little bit predictable, really, at times. Now, Killer Book Club, it's not something that's going to blow you away or anything, but I did enjoy it for what it was. Had problems, but also one of the more better executed stories than a lot of these movies that have come before it on this list. Next up, we have a Stephen King adaptation, The Boogeyman, and this follows two young girls who are haunted by this presence in their house that is coming for them in darkness. And again, it does feel like a movie that we get all the time, but I thought this one was interesting, a little bit more interesting. We're trying to discover what this thing is, what it wants, and we see these two, this main one, the older sister, trying to uncover it. It's well-built storytelling where the mystery is unfolding. Unfortunately, I wasn't a fan of a lot of the shots in this film because it is a very dark movie, and this thing comes in darkness for these people in the house and tries to, sort of kill them when it's dark. And they don't turn the lights on hardly ever in the house. Like, there's this girl at 10 o'clock at night, the younger sister, and she's playing the PlayStation in the living room with all the lights off. Now, if you've been having some of these episodes with this monster trying to kill you in the dark, why would you not turn the lights on? That did not make sense to me at all. So, not one of my favourite Stephen King adaptations by any stretch, but I did like the main character of the movie. I'm really sorry I forgot her name. She was in that TV show Yellow Jackets. Thought she was awesome, but again, a good little story, but one that kind of just, yeah, once you see the damn thing after them, you stop caring. But overall, not too bad. Next up, we have Megan, who could go on to be a popular slasher icon. I feel like they're probably going to make a second one. And this is a killer doll movie that I was really looking forward to. And it did disappoint me a little bit, but it was still a fine movie to watch. I liked how this killer doll is all using modern technology of how it works. It's kind of like a very advanced phone, but in robot form. And AI is becoming a little bit of a bigger thing nowadays, isn't it? So this movie will probably be a little bit more relevant in a couple of years, I feel. And the aunt of this girl who's been orphaned because her parents have died is working on this doll, and she is given the first prototype of this doll to try and, see how she reacts with it. It's kind of like a test run for the toy company, basically. And Megan has got a very sinister start to it, and the technology inside her starts to take over. People start dying around this young girl and stuff. And of course, it is Megan responsible for all these deaths. Now, I do think the character of Megan was cool. I like the way she crawled everywhere past people. Started chasing after people. She was protective of this young girl. And she just will kill anyone who gets in her way, basically. My big problems with it, the aunt of this movie didn't feel like she just lost her sister. She's kind of just shrugged her shoulders and got on with it. It was like 2 days after the mother and father of this young girl had died, and she's just getting on with her job and not really caring. Oh, that was kind of weird. The death scenes could have been great, but they kind of cut away. It's like they're trying to get a 12A rating or whatever, PG-13, whatever you want to call it. I know there's a more gruesome cut out there, but I've heard it doesn't bring all that much, to be honest. And there was some cringe moments as well with Megan singing Bulletproof to the young girl and stuff. I was like, oh, please stop. But overall, not too bad. Again, took a long while to get where it was going, but once it did, it was kind of fun to watch. That is Megan. Next up is It Lives Inside, which uses Indian mythology to tell its story, and this demon that is all in that culture was incorporated into the story. And I thought, I wanted to see a little bit more of that because it played on it so much. But it was a real balancing act here of going down the generic route and trying to do its own story. It kind of let the generic path take over a little bit there when I wish it wouldn't have. Now, I got behind the young girl in this story. This demon is starting to slowly take over and terrorize and try and sort of terrorize the town, and I really wanted to get behind it and let her stop this damn thing. I like the character arc with her mother that was going on in here, because she doesn't really get on with her mother at the start, and then the coming together sort of helps, with dealing with this demon. I thought that was nicely written. And there was some really fun moments as well, especially a kid on the swing there where this thing just devours him, and the swings are just, you see the aftermath of these swings just sort of, swinging everywhere after the kid's been killed and stuff. So some nice directional choices there. Overall, though, it kind of felt like the Boogeyman, where I'd seen it before. Like I said, the generic side took over the cool Indian mythology that it had going for it, and yeah, it's kind of like these Hollywood execs said, I know you're doing this, but we need to sprinkle a little bit more in there to appeal to a mass audience. And that kind of ruined the movie a little bit there. So that is It Lives Inside. Next up, we have The Blackening. Now, this is a horror comedy that plays on the fact of how black people in horror movies, how they are treated, and the black horror tropes. So the tagline of the film is, we can't all die first, because the black person usually dies and stuff. So every character in this movie is black, and they all go to stay at this cabin, and they find this board game, and even that plays on a hell of a lot of black culture and stuff. And I thought that was the coolest moment of the movie, where they find this board game and they're asking them all questions like how many black side characters were in the show Friends, and they're trying to think of it and stuff like that, otherwise one of them will die. And there was some fun moments in this movie, some really cool kills and stuff like that. But the killer looked awesome as well. But my biggest problems were there was one main character who I really hated. The geeky guy in this movie. It came very, very predictable. And when the game started to cheat a little bit by they're answering questions correct and they're saying, no, that's the wrong answer when it wasn't, and killing them off, I kind of started to lose a little bit of interest. But this movie was quite funny in places. There was some really funny characters in there. And I thought it was a fun story and fun sort of vibe it had going for it, and by basically using the black community and making fun of itself, really. There was some things in there that I didn't quite get, but obviously I don't know if that movie is fully catered to me, but it was a fun enough time. So that is The Blackening. Next up, we have Five Nights at Freddy's. I've seen people hating this movie. I've seen people loving this movie. And the ones who love it seem to be fans of the video game, and the ones who hate it seem to not be fans. Now, I'm sort of in the middle here. I try to keep that in the back of my mind because I've never played the video games. I've seen what they're about and stuff and how they play, but I've never actually played it, and I don't know too much about this video game. I understand now that there's a lot of lore in the background there, and there's a bit more to it. I think there's like little short stories or comics or something like that, and there's a bigger expansion on the world than just the video game. So people who know about that will probably enjoy this movie a lot more than me. But this basically is about this guy who's got to man this pizzeria restaurant that's been abandoned for 5 days, and each night it's getting a little bit harder, kind of like the game plays out. Now, Josh Hutcherson is the main character of this movie, and I thought he'd done a really good job at playing this guy who's struggling a little bit because he's got to look after his sister, he needs money, and he has to take this job as security, basically. However, in the third act, his acting went way off when he had to show emotion and anger. I was like, oh, that's not good. I mean, you were doing such a good job up to there, Josh, but unfortunately, I don't think he pulled all that off when he was shouting at characters and stuff. The movie is very predictable. I knew what was going to happen at the end. I knew how it was going to play out. And the kills, whilst being fun, also cut away, kind of like Megan did. So it doesn't fully go for that violence that it probably could have had if it went to the 18 R rating. But the puppets and stuff look cool, and it was just an easy watch, really. It's one of them that you don't have to think too much about it. You can just go in and have a bit of fun with it. And we're probably going to get a sequel now, because I think this is... Was it the best performing horror movie of the year? Or one of them? So that tells you everything, doesn't it? There are fans out there. There is a fan base for this. And we're going to get another one. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But this one was fine. It was okay. Next up is Unwelcome, which is a movie that I hadn't hardly any hopes for, but I wanted to see it anyway, because I read the plot synopsis and I thought, this is going to be terrible. This is about this family or this couple, and one of them is the female is pregnant, and they go and stay in Ireland because of a home invasion thing that happened, and they go, let's just move town, let's go for a better life. And when they get to this house, they are told by this woman who lives there that they have to feed these little people through the night, otherwise they will sort of come into their house and not be very happy and try and sort of kill them. And that does sound ridiculous, but that was more of a side story. This film focuses more on home invasion. There are characters in the town who don't take too kindly to them and try and sort of make their life a living hell. And that was the more interesting aspect of this film. Really liked the couple in this, got behind them, wanted it all to work out for them. And the villains in this movie were very unlikable, which means they did their job, basically. I think it's Cole Meany is the main character of the villains in this movie. He done a great job. And the side story of all these little people that want to come in the house played out in the third act, and it was fun. It was fun enough. So not a perfect movie, very silly film, but one that kind of worked for me. Next up we have VHS 85. Now I did not like VHS 99 whatsoever, so again I didn't expect much here. But this one was a lot better than VHS 99, and this is 5 stories involving lots of different things, although the first and the fourth story does tie together, which I thought was the best thing about the entire film. I loved how that came together. But we got like characters who are on this boat and they're getting taken out by this sniper. We got another one where this earthquake's happening, but is it a disaster or is the demonic force making this earthquake happen? We got one where this woman is using the first type of sort of VR and she's seeing things and stuff and all things are going wrong and there's people on stage watching her, you know, use this VR thing. A lot of people didn't like that story, but I thought it was all right. And then we've got this weird cult family that sort of ties to the first one. And then we've also got this one where there's murders that are happening. And this guy is sending the videotapes to the police department before the murders happen. So that one was, I think Scott Derrickson might have done that one. That was by far the best story. But the one where it linked together was the more clever part of the movie, I thought. And you know what? This goes down a sinister route. It doesn't hold back with the violence and stuff like that. And it was nicely filmed for the found footage movie. Like it's done to feel like it was filmed in 85. And it feels like it could, you know, a very realistic type movie, the way it's filmed. So it's found footage done right, in my opinion. So that is VHS 85. Next up, we had The Nun 2, another movie that I had no hopes for whatsoever. I did not like The Conjuring 3. The Nun was kind of dull. And The Curse of La Llorona just done nothing for me. So I didn't expect anything for this one. And lo and behold, it's quite high on the list. Didn't make the top 10, but it's up there. And this sees Thaisa Farmiga, who is travelling to this orphanage. She was in the first movie with her friend to discover what's going on there because there are, you know, reports that Valak might be back and sort of in this, I don't know if it's an orphanage or a school for young girls. I can't quite remember. But she's travelling there while all this stuff's going on. Now, the first movie does suffer from just having this one linear story with her and this guy who are discovering this chapel in this small town. But here, we go back and forth to these two stories that are finally going to come together in the third act. And I think that worked a whole lot better for the movie. There were some really cool jump scares in this film. I'm not usually a big fan of them. And there are some generic ones here too, but there was some that really did work, especially the one on the magazine stand. And it had characters that I liked, characters that I could get behind. A very visually stunning movie. You know, even The Nun, the first one, I think that's visually stunning. You know, the lighting and everything just works, especially when characters are walking down these cobbled streets and stuff like that. And the third act does go a little bit down the action route, but it still played out nicely, I thought. So this one was a nice surprise for me. Nothing mind-blowing, you know, it does fit snugly in the middle of the Conjuring universe. If I was ranking them, probably towards the better end, really, but a lot better than I thought it would be. So that is The Nun 2. Next up is Renfield, a horror comedy film which sees Renfield, who is taking orders all his life from Dracula, played by Nicolas Cage in this movie, and he thinks, fuck that, I'm just going to go and do my own thing now. And he's trying to get away from Dracula, who kind of won't let him because he's this controlling narcissist. And you know, he just can't escape the clutches of his leader, his boss, really. And I thought this was a really fun movie, some really fun comedy thrown in here. And Nicolas Cage as Dracula was awesome. He just played that part down to a T. The comedy sort of mashes with the violence to come together nicely. I mean, it does do a little bit more comedy than horror, but the violence is there to behold. I liked moments where they were going to this sort of awareness class. I thought they were really fun moments with the dialogue and stuff. Nicholas Hoult, who had a bit of an emergence in the last year or two, really played the part of Renfield very well in this film, I thought. I think he's a great actor, and you really do feel sorry for the guy. Some weird choices with the martial arts action type deals going on here. Awkwafina in this movie, I think she done an okay job. A lot of people don't like her, but I thought she was okay as a side character here. But all the martial arts stuff took me out of it a little bit. But overall, I thought this was a really fun time, and one that you can just sit back, not think too much about, and just have fun with. That is Renfield. Just missing out on the top 10 is Saw X. Yes, this was the biggest surprise of 2023 for me regarding horror movies, because I thought I was done with this franchise. I love parts 1 and 2. Part 6 is quite good as well, I feel, but everything else is just kind of a unmemorable, average movie to me. And this one shocked me of how much I enjoyed it. Now, this sees Jigsaw, who has been done wrong by these people who say they can cure cancer and trick people in to getting their cancer cured, even though they're not. They kind of say it's cured and they do a runner and take all the money. And they are the worst type of people in the entire world. And I said to myself, I'm not getting behind Jigsaw in this movie, because I heard there was a lot of talk going in that you attach yourself to him, and I thought, there's no way I know what he's going to do in future, because this takes place between Saw 1 and 2. I know this big murderer he's going to become. There's no way I can get behind this guy, and you can't help it, because these people who have wronged done him are the worst people in the entire world, especially the main female leader of this group. I hated her so much. Can't quite remember a movie where I just hated the character so much. Probably the last time I really wanted someone to meet a gruesome end was the Queen in Game of Thrones, played by Lena Headey there. And I just wanted this woman to just get the worst death imaginable, which is really possible in a Saw movie. But all the side characters that she is sort of a team with are horrible people as well. And you do root for Jigsaw when he puts them all in these traps. You want them to sort of get their comeuppance, really. And the movie is really well built up for its first hour. It's like a story building process, and then we jump right into the traps for the second half. And that's what I liked about the movie. You're anticipating the second half. You know the traps are going to come, where we usually just jump into them straight away. But this one took its time and then just threw it all at you, and I really liked that. Some questionable decisions regarding what happens at the end of the movie. There was something I really didn't like at the end of the movie, and we might have to wait for Saw 11. If you've seen the film, you might know what I mean. And some silly little choices there. But overall, I thought Saw X was a really surprising time, and I like it better than Saw 6. So it's up there with the first two movies for me in the top 3 Saw movies. Okay, getting into the top 10 now, guys. Now, if you want to see me go into more detail with these films, I'm kind of going over all these movies quite quick. You can see my top 10 horror movies of the year, where I'll talk about these a lot more, and I'll leave it in the link down below. But in 10th, we do have When Evil Lurks. This is a spin on demonic possession, where it acts as the demonic possession acts as a virus, and once it gets out, people start getting possessed here and there. And I thought that was a really cool original take on the subgenre that we have been bloated by. Earlier on, I spoke about the Pope's Exorcist, the Exorcist Believer. We're seeing it all the time, but here it done something totally different. This is an Argentinian film, I believe, and it doesn't hold back from the violence. It really goes for it in some scenes. There are moments where you're like, holy shit, where did that come from? And it just played out very nicely. And if you're a horror fan, I definitely recommend worth giving this a go, because it felt original and fresh. It felt like something I hadn't really seen before, even though it is part of the demonic possession subgenre. There are some characters who make questionable decisions, and you're like, why did you do that? But pretty much this movie overall was a solid horror entry for this year. Next up, we have Totally Killer. This is a horror comedy that uses the Back to the Future concept, where this girl has to go back in time to the 80s to stop a killer from murdering her mum 30 years into the future. You know what? It knows what it's doing. It mentions the movie Back to the Future in the film, so it knows exactly what it is. There was some really cool kill scenes in this movie, some really fun dialogue. I love it when she goes back and sees her mother when she was a teenager, and the mother is a horrible person. She's always telling her to fuck off and die and stuff like that. And she hates her mother when she was younger. And, I just thought the concept and how it all played out was nicely done. A little bit of a predictable ending, No, there was part of it that was predictable, part of it that it wasn't, but I did see some of it coming. And you know, it was an entertaining time. The most of this movie that I was watching, I just had a fun time with it. It's got the entertainment factor. It's a bright and colourful film. You know, it wants you to have fun with it, and that's exactly what I did. And I wish this concept would be used a little bit more at times. But to have the Back to the Future concept with a horror twist was a good idea, I thought. So that is totally killer. Next up, we have Hell House LLC Origins, The Carmichael Manor. This is a prequel to the original Hell House from 2015, I believe. And there have been a couple of sequels. I only watched the first sequel, the second movie. I did not like it, so I never checked out the third one. My cousin, who's a big fan of these films, said it was awful. But I wanted to check this one out because I'd heard a lot of people saying it's as good as the original. And it was. Okay, maybe not as good, but it's on the level. It's found its level again. And it was way better than the sequel we got years ago. But what I will say that this has got over the original is well more terrifying. I am not easily scared by films, but this movie absolutely terrified me. There was times where I was hiding behind a pillow because I was like, holy shit, what is gonna happen next here? This follows a very simple concept of 3 ghost hunters going to stay in this supposed haunted mansion, and things just start to happen and they kind of can't get out of there. And some of the sequences that go on in this movie, are just really scary to watch, really creepy, really get under your skin. And what I liked about it is it does not stop for a breather. Once one thing's happened, like the movie takes about 30 minutes to get into it, and once one terrifying scene happens, the next one is already building. It does not let you breathe for 10 minutes, 5 minutes. It just keeps going for it, and you're like, holy shit, what is happening next? I need a breather here, I need to stop. But the movie is really one of them films that scared the absolute pants off me. Now, horror is subjective. It's not going to be scary for everyone, but for me, and my wife who watched it with me, we both thought it was terrifying. And I've recommended this film to other people in my work and stuff, and they said the same. So if you haven't seen this film and you haven't seen the original, you can still watch this one on its own. But I do recommend going to watch the original, then this, and you'll have a really found footage, a really good time with these found footage movies because they are executed very well for that subgenre. Next up, we have Cobweb, which sort of borrows a few story elements from People Under the Stairs. This is about this young boy who's not really having the best of times. He's bullied at school. His mum and dad are very strict parents. And every time he goes to bed, he can hear a knock on the wall. And his parents are just saying, oh, don't worry, it's nothing to worry about. You're hearing things. But he is convinced someone is living in the walls of his house. And he gets down to sort of investigate it. And what I really liked about this movie is the mystery of it. You're kind of wondering what's going on here. And the parents are so weird in this movie. Lizzie Kaplan and Anthony Starr give really great performances in this movie. And you don't know if they're kind of behind something because their kid went missing years before. And they kind of seem to hint that they know about it, but they won't tell the full story. So there's a dark past behind these two characters. And this kid is sort of, they don't really want to tell him anything that's going on. And I really got behind the character of the kid as well. I thought he put in a great performance. You feel sorry for him. You want him to succeed and have a better life. And you just feel really bad for the guy, living in these walls. And you're potentially thinking, is there a friend in these walls for him? But the whole mystery of the movie is where it's at. Now, there is one moment where this teacher sort of wants to get down to the bottom of what's happening in this kid's life. She goes to the house, and Anthony Starr and Lizzie Kaplan kind of acting very strange. And it's one of the best scenes in horror in all year. I was just like, holy shit, what is going to happen here? Just so much well-built tension in that scene. But Cobweb is something really cool, something really different. And the third act, I've heard a lot of people say they didn't like it. It does fall a little bit in quality, but it's still a good third act, I thought. So that is Cobweb. Next up, we have Talk to Me, another one that takes the possession subgenre and sort of does something a little bit new with it. A bunch of friends have this hand, and once they shake it and say "talk to me," they see these spirits, you know, come to them, and they use it as like a party trick, but they're not really meant to hold on for it any longer than 90 seconds, or it can all go wrong. And lo and behold, it all goes wrong. And we see Sophia Wilde, who probably gave the best performance in any horror movie this year as the main protagonist. And she's trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with this hand. And she's got a lot of personal problems in life. She's not the most perfect human being, like a lot of these movies do. They just really give you someone to get behind. But here, she's not the perfect person. You kind of... It's like kind of like 2013 Evil Dead, where this main protagonist got a few problems, and you appreciate that it's something different within the character, but she's still likable, if you get me. And this Talk to Me from the Raka brothers, their directional debut, was an absolute quality film, and one that after it, I just walked out the cinema and went, yeah, I watched a great movie there. The ending is awesome, and it's again like a whole mystery unraveling as it goes on. So yeah, I can't wait to see what they do next. A really, really strong movie for the year, and this is going to end up in a lot of people's top fives, I feel, for the year. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and let's hope we get more quality from these directors. That is Talk to Me. Next up might be a surprise to some people, but that is Knock at the Cabin, M. Night Shyamalan's latest film. And you know what? This is a movie I watched and thought that was good, and I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I talked about it with my wife for a while after it, and I just realised how much I actually enjoyed this film. This is about this gay couple with their adopted daughter, and they go and stay in this cabin, and Dave Bautista and his three friends knock at the cabin and say, one of you has got to die, otherwise the world is going to end. And one of these, you know, one of the couple believe him, and the other one is starting to think, the other one thinks that they're just absolutely insane. And I liked how the movie plays on each shoulder. You kind of like, okay, do I believe him like this guy, or do I believe like this guy that they are totally insane? And you kind of don't know what to believe. Are these characters really, you know, just in a different world to what we are, or are they actually coming here with a purpose? And what I like about Shyamalan, he's done it with Signs, is that he can make an event happen and something disastrous, but we all are in this secluded one place, and it tells the story from there, and we just see snippets of the outside world here and there. I loved how he done that within this movie. Dave Bautista gives a great performance, up there with Drax for his best performances. Really love seeing Rupert Grint as a villain in here as well, and there are some really strong death scenes in this movie when they happen and why they happen. You'll know what I mean when you watch the movie, but you're like, holy shit. So for me, this was a movie that kept me intrigued until the end. My only real gripe with it is that there was no M. Night Shyamalan famous twist in there, and maybe the twist was that there wasn't a twist, but I just think a lot of people will remember this movie a hell of a lot more if he threw one of his famous twists in, but unfortunately it didn't really have it. But still a very solid movie, and that is Knock at the Cabin. Next up we have Thanksgiving. Now, I had a lot of fun with this film, one of Eli Roth's best movies. I watched all his movies leading up to this one, and I would probably put this third out of all the movies that I like, just behind the Hostel movies. But this sees this Black Friday event where a lot of people rush into this store and people are killed. And a year later, this killer wants to take revenge on the people who caused this tragedy to happen. And he's using social media and stuff to pick these characters off one by one and send them like decapitated heads of some of the characters he's killed to the phones of these characters. And he's making like a dinner table and they've all got the names on and who's going to be next. Kind of like Killer Book Club done a little bit there, where it's kind of teasing who's going to kill next and stuff, and all these characters are put on edge. John Carver is such a great killer in this movie. That's the name of the killer in the movie, not The Unveiling, just to let you guys know. And so I'm not giving anything away there, but I really hope we see more of this character in future. You know, let him lead the way with Art the Clown for iconic slasher villains going forward, and maybe Megan. But some of the kills in this movie were awesome. Now, I loved how the movie balanced the comedy and the horror. One minute I'm laughing my ass off, and the next minute I'm like, holy shit, that death scene was so violent and gory. And I just had a really fun time at the cinema with this. A lot of people said they didn't like the characters in this movie, but I thought they were fine, to be honest. And the movie just done a really good job of bringing the slasher genre back, paying homage to them 80s movies. This would fit very nicely in there if it was filmed with an older camera and didn't have all the social media stuff in there. That's what it felt like, an 80s movie brought to the modern day. And I had a lot of fun with it. And it's another holiday horror, especially for Americans, that we can watch every year now. That is Thanksgiving. Next up, we have Evil Dead Rise. I really loved the location change of this movie into an apartment block, even though it does keep that whole Evil Dead feeling there. So basically, it all takes place in this apartment block room because the characters are kind of stuck in there. So it still uses that sense of isolation, but smartly moves it to another location. And you might have all seen the cover for this movie, but the mother is the main demonite in this film. And it is all set up like an usual Evil Dead movie where the disc is spun backwards and stuff, and the Evil Dead is read out, and one of the characters becomes possessed. And it's basically her trying to get in and murder her family, basically. And a lot of people, again, I've said they didn't like the characters in this movie, but I really did feel for them, especially the younger ones. I didn't want them to come to any harm. And there's some really cool directional moments in this film where, you know, one of the kids is looking out the peephole and there's just blood all on the side of the peephole, but the mother is out there trying to get in and all murder is happening behind the peephole. Some really cool directional choices like that. It carries all the Evil Dead tropes in there with blood all over characters' faces, chainsaws here and there. The gore is off the scale towards the end of the movie, and it does something a little bit different with the creature design at the end of the film, which I appreciated. Brought something new to the franchise there. And you know what? I just had a really good time with it. I thought this was one of the strongest horror movies of the year. I'm glad they did not just let it go to streaming because test audiences loved it, so they decided to bring it to the big screen. And it was one of the better Evil Dead movies. You know, I've done a full ranking of these, and I think I had a 3rd out of 5th, so it's in the middle there, but I still feel it's like one of the strongest, you know, overall, you know, just behind Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead 2013 for me. That is Evil Dead Rise. Coming in second place is going to be Scream 6. Yeah, maybe a surprise for some people, but I had a really good time with this. And I liked how the opening sort of showed us who Ghostface was. And I was thinking, oh, are they going to do that for the entire film? This is something I've been asking for. And unfortunately, they didn't. But the movie still played out very well. I loved all the Ghostface comedic dark line moments here. Some really great kills in there. The one where he is just going into a supermarket, stabbing people up, and then he grabs a shotgun. I was like, holy shit, Ghostface has got a shotgun here. Really cool directional moments. It uses the location of New York well at times, especially one where the character's trying to get from one apartment block to the other on a ladder. And then there was like really well built tense scenes on a subway. And that was the teaser trailer we first got, but when you see it in the movie play out, it's much longer, and you're kind of like, holy shit, what is going to happen here? With the lights flickering on the train and stuff like that. And like I said, the first hour of the movie is so strong. Unfortunately, the last 30 minutes where the reveals happen and all that is kind of animated, kind of cartoonish, and not the best reveal in the entire series by any stretch. But I still had a great time with Scream 6. It's my second favourite sequel now after Scream 4. Yes, maybe another unpopular opinion, but I had a great time with it. So that is Scream 6. Coming in first place, though, is a very original movie that I've quite not seen anything like, and that is Infinity Pool. Now, this follows this couple who go and stay on this holiday type island and meet Mia Goth and her husband or boyfriend, I can't quite remember, go out on the town with them. Something happens, and then Alexander Skarsgård is able to be punished by death because that's the law of this little island they're staying on. He can't quite believe what he's hearing, and they say to him, look, if you got money, you can sort of fake your death here. And I can't say too much more than that. But the movie just goes down a path I have never quite seen done before. And I could not take my eyes off anything that was happening. This was such an original movie. Something that was just kept me fully gripped. Alexander Skarsgård's character, you kind of get behind him because you're like, you know, he didn't mean for whatever to happen, and he's meeting all these other characters on the island who are sort of trying to get him, you know, in with them, and you're kind of like, oh, trying to make decisions for him in your head for him to make the best decision. Mia Goth is an absolute superstar. This is probably my favorite performance by her. Like something happens in the third act where she's just screaming Alexander Skarsgård's character's name, and it's just so great to watch. The accent she puts on is so over the top, but it just works. She is the best thing about the entire film. She is such a superstar. Can't wait to see her in Maxine and stuff. But the story that plays out here is just awesome. I loved what Brandon Cronenberg did here with this film. He has some really nice shots as well, some really wide shots that he just had the talent behind the camera with. Can't wait to check out his other two movies now. That has really pushed me to want to watch Possessor and the other one he made in 2012. And he's a director I'm going to be looking out for now. But Infinity Pool for me was my favourite film of the year, not just my favourite horror film. That is Infinity Pool at #1. Hey guys, hope you all enjoyed this horror ranking video. Don't forget to leave your favourite movies of the year down below. Don't forget to check out my other videos. I've done top 10 of the year where I go into more detail, top 5 most disappointing, top 5 surprising, and my top 10 most anticipated for 2024. So that'll all be in the link down below. So thanks so much everyone. You all take care. If horror is your sort of thing, please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you all on the next video.